we have this exciting opportunity. We have 100,000 euros to spend. And I thought I could start with Linda, and we could see like what Anthony needs to do to make carbon sexy to the world, right? So we've got to convince the farmers to do the project. We have to convince the restaurateurs to put it on their check. We have to convince consumers, especially in San Francisco, that they're going to spend more money on their food, and it's going to mean something big. So, Linda, I know I'm sort of throwing this on her, but she must be thinking on her feet. She's been with IDEO for
I'm used to it.
A few decades.
I mean, I would say the success of Anthony's initiative honestly started yesterday in the room when the decision was made to shine a spotlight on what Anthony's doing. Although, credit to you, you had already started to build the network that you needed to build with global chefs that have influence and farmers who are connected to them, as well as starting to think about changing policies at the state level. So the journey didn't start yesterday, but the idea of amplifying this initiative and using this as a platform to shine a spotlight on it, I think was the first step. I think today is also an opportunity for, if I think about the sphere of influence in this room, and if we all use our social media networks to talk about Anthony and the work he's doing and to promote him, I think a couple of things will happen. One is that we will influence other influencers, and I think we'll also start to influence consumers. And the thing that I've noticed is that in this room or in rooms like this, we've been able to connect the notion of food and climate change. But I think the average consumer, that's a very abstract topic, and I don't think they have made that connection yet. So the more we begin to shine a spotlight, we use some of the voices in this room to shine a spotlight and to help consumers understand that, I think that's going to go a long way. And then I think about some of the restaurants that you're collaborating with and bringing into this network. Is there a universal way that we can help consumers navigate towards them in the way that we have LEED certified buildings? Like, is there a universal system that we can use where we're actually letting consumers move towards the types of restaurants that they should be eating at while bringing the climate change story to life within those restaurants? Just a couple of top of my head ideas.
That's great. Thanks for playing. So I'm going to hold Anthony for a second. So Chris, what do you think Anthony can do with his 100,000 euros to amplify climate change?
One of the things I think a lot about is this maturity curve of innovation. And I think we're at these early phases, right, where there's a concept becoming an idea. And I think testing that idea and proving it in a few places and with some of the partners that you've already assembled and furthering that, I think those are the types of proof points that really lead to that next step of scale. And what's exciting to me about a maturity curve is that it's not incremental change, that it actually is exponential change. So I think we're at this, I hope that through this you can get to the inflection point where we start to see the shape of that hockey stick start to curve upward because you've had laid the groundwork early stage and now have this opportunity to move up this innovation curve and start heading in a totally new trajectory, actually.
That's great. I love that point. Lauren, how does he get farmers to want to do this?
I think the way to get farmers to want to do this is farmers are very risk averse. So by using people like me as an example, it's like, hey, we're doing well. We're being successful. We're making money. We're having fun. By helping spotlight people like us, peer pressure will kick into effect and more farmers will do it. We're already seeing it happen. I was one of the first carbon farm plans in the country, and now there's thousands of carbon farm plans. So it's working. So
that's great. So, okay, so Anthony, your focus for this topic is you mentioned, and as a restaurant owner, Anthony knows this firsthand. You called it the impossibility of the economics in the restaurant industry, which means that you thought to yourself, okay, what I'm doing isn't moving the needle, so I need to do something different. But with restaurants facing so many pressures, like you mentioned, the labor market, rent, there's just so many issues that restaurateurs worry about. How do you make the environment a priority for them?
Well, first of all, you guys are hired. Let's work on this together. I hope that, like you said, basically we can turn that corner. I feel like for years it's sort of been like kind of the feeling of like pushing a boulder up a mountain. Basically, the solution is so optimistic. I think everybody is kind of concerned about climate change, and often the solutions tend towards the negative. You know, it's like eat trash, eat bugs, like stop eating the things you like. Not that there's anything wrong with eating trash or bugs, you know, but you know, it's not something that you get fired up about and you crave. And I think what we're talking about is a solution centered around healthy soil and better nutrition. And so, I don't know, Green New Deal.
Yeah, great. So I want to be, you know, because we haven't spent a lot of time talking about food waste, but I think with the opportunity of Anthony winning the award and having a rancher here, I'm focusing us on carbon farming and the climate. So my question is for Lauren. What's the most challenging of converting a farm from traditional to a carbon positive farm? And you know, it's like there's applying compost, there's the compost tea, there's the extra labor, there's the costs. And so I'm curious about sort of the challenges of converting, and then also how you make the money, how you make enough money, right? When your only lever really is just charging more for the product.
So it's an interesting thing that I deal with on a daily basis. Is, you know, how do we make a profit and do good for the environment and for our pocketbook? And I'd say the first thing is you have to want to change. You know, have to want to do good for both and dream about it and figure out how that's possible. The second is there's lots of people out there that want to help, that have money that, you know, that I don't necessarily have. So there's government programs out there that I've gone aggressively for and actually received. You know, there's the Anthony mentioned the California Healthy Soils Initiative. I received a $75,000 grant to actually sequester more carbon on our property. So that's really beneficial. And the last part of your question, I believe, is about how do we get enough of a price for our product. It doesn't actually require a huge price premium to do good. So we charge a price premium because our product, we believe, is actually better, tastes better, it's better for the environment, and it's scarce. You know, there's only so much of it. So we charge a little bit of a premium for that. But the last part about that is we don't work with every single restaurant. You know, we work with the restaurants that want to make change and see a difference, and the restaurants and the consumers vote with their dollars. So since we have a small amount of supply, you know, we work with a handful of chefs, you know, 30 or 40 chefs around the Bay Area, and a lot of them actually cut their teeth at Alice's restaurant. You know, so they learn from the best.
Yeah, definitely. I wish I'd cut my teeth at Alice's restaurant too. Okay, so this question is going to be for each of you. The media, myself included, which is a little disheartening. You know, carbon isn't a sexy topic to write about or to pitch to editors. They're not super interested, right? They want to talk about Impossible 2.0. They want to talk about the Beyond Meat, biggest IPO in 2 decades. So how do we keep animals grazing on land as an important part of the ecosystem? Yeah, Linda.
Always starting with me with the big one.
Sorry. I know, I realized.
Wow.
Okay, I'll start with Anthony.
No. I mean, it's interesting because I was thinking about, I recently saw the documentary, The Biggest Little Farm. I don't know who's seen the documentary. And I think what I loved about that is they don't mention climate change once. They talk about the natural, the sort of relationship between the animals and the land and the health of the land and how that happens over time and how it is an ecosystem and it is all reliant upon each other. And I feel like the sort of the story of climate change and carbon, it comes with a sort of a negativity to it and a weight that feels like you can't approach it and you can't solve for it. Whereas I think, you know, documentaries like The Biggest Little Farm, it shows the struggles obviously that they go through, but there's a lightness and a naturalness to that system and how that system is working. And so I think if we can move more towards that type of communication, I actually think there is positivity and optimism that you can actually address the change that's needed to happen versus the doom and gloom story that I think it covers a lot of it.
That's a great point. Composting, I think, had the doom and gloom, and now we're trying to pick it up with food waste. Food waste is more interesting, or actually, it's like food not eaten, right? Waste is still a negative word. Anthony, thoughts on bubbling up climate to be just as exciting as Impossible 2.0?
I'll try to give you a real world example of how I would envision this happening. The company Shake Shack, for example, is also a corporation with a lot of money behind it. And so I think could set an example for, fast food at large. Shake Shack in California has started a partnership with Richard's grass-fed beef, which is a great regenerative rancher as well. And so I think at a few locations, they're starting to serve I think they call it like a California specialty burger. Don't quote me on the marketing. But so to me, what would be super exciting would be if, for example, those same locations added a 10-cent charge on the burgers or whatever is necessary and contributed that to Richard's to help them implement better practices. And eventually, not just to Richard's, but within their own supply chain. And so you kind of can see like both levers for change or both theories of change on display. One is actually sourcing well, and one is contributing to a renewable food system and to actually create the necessary change on the not as sustainable ranch. And I think that would immediately make it happen.
I like it. I'll email the CEO of Shake Shack later. Chris, what do you think?
So one of the authors who influenced me early in thinking about sustainability is an architect named Bill McDonough, who many of you are likely familiar with. He wrote a book called Cradle to Cradle. But in it, he pointed out that the environmental movement has got it wrong. We have focused for 20 years on two things: negative framing around let's do less bad, and then two, abstract framing, let's save ice caps. And I think, to me, what the shift I'm excited about that I think will continue to capture the public imagination is solutions orientation. So I think even in Project Drawdown, which you mentioned, that really shifted the framing away from let's not destroy our planet to let's reverse global warming, and here are the top 100 solutions to doing so. And I think second is personal stories that are exciting and inspiring. I don't know about you, but listening to Lauren talk about his ranch, I wanted to go visit. He ended with, "This is my happy place." So I think that positive personal framing of examples, and I think we're at a point where we actually have some of those examples. So being able to point at the restaurants who have partnered for carbon neutrality is amazing to think about. There are not only ideas out there, but actually in practice, people and organizations putting those into action, and that's inspiring. So I think we have a moment to shift that narrative, but positive framing, and I think personal relevance and avoiding, I think the risk that we all fall into in San Francisco and at this conference is the elite framing. And so I think making it personally relevant to everyone, I think is really critical.
You've got something to say, Lauren.
Are you going to actually let me talk about this? So this is actually a really interesting topic that I'm going to get more and more educated on. But I love Silicon Valley, but there's no quick fix to healthy food. We don't need to come up with new concepts. And if you look at a comparison of the carbon cycle and emissions of the fake meats or impossible meats and what their ingredients are compared to what we're doing in terms of regenerative agriculture, the fake meats are not going to save the planet. If anything, they're contributing to carbon emissions and not health of food. And I use the example of margarine. 30 years ago, people thought margarine was going to be the save the world. And now everybody's like, oh no, you need to go back to animal fat or real fat. Margarine's not good for you. Or Tang. Astronauts used to drink Tang, so we thought it was good for us. This is not. Yeah. I'm done.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I want to open it up to you guys. I know I hate sitting and watching when I can't ask any questions, but I do want to start with Joan Roca, because I think you had something that came to mind. So I'm going to give it to you.
Gracias. Bueno, en primer lugar, gracias por estas charlas inspiradoras. Está siendo muy, muy, muy interesante. Yo quería añadir algo que tiene que ver con el panel de ayer del jurado, ¿no? Y respecto a Antoni Minia y a su premio, a su reconocimiento. una de las cosas que dijimos ayer es que la mayoría de los restaurantes, de los mejores restaurantes del mundo que estábamos que representábamos en el jurado, decidimos trabajar con la organización de Anthony Min y hacer que de esta manera ese mensaje y esa forma de auditar y de ser más sostenibles los restaurantes lo empezaremos a hacer nosotros en nuestras casas, así que empezaremos a colaborar con Anthony a partir de ya. Muchas gracias.
Anthony, he was, just to rephrase in English, he was explaining that after the discussion yesterday in the jury, they committed to start taking the advice that you give to restaurants in order to have all these restaurants of the members of our jury having taken action so they can take part of this discussion, but also, or more specifically, of the solution.
So I think there's a few restaurateurs out here. Anybody in San Francisco want to put their restaurant's name on the bill? Okay. Well, any questions that anybody wants to ask? No? Oh, good. Oh, great. And tell us your name and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Elise, and I'm from Turkey, Istanbul. I'm a scientist, and I'm vegan. And I've been, thinking a lot about sustainability and food. And back in Turkey, I have kids, so although I'm vegan, my kids are not, and I try to support farmers who, like you, they're into, growing the soil, making sure that the soil takes a lot of water and it's fertile. And like you said, the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat and all these fake meats, they're good, I think, in a certain way, but we don't have to eat them. What about, going from traditional or conventional farming to positive carbon farming? Reduces the carbon a lot, but what if we, go even to an extreme, because the world needs us to act in an extreme way right now for climate change. We have very little time left. Our the coral reefs are gone almost. What about going to just natural plants like for example, cashews or beans and stuff? What do you all think about that? I'm not just only asking to the farmers.
So I think the question in a nutshell is there's the processed version of the Impossibles and Beyonds. Mm-hmm. There's the grass-fed, super happy animals on Lawrence Farm. And then there's this other option, like let's not forget that we could be eating like beans and plants and making a great veggie burger out of those. Mm-hmm. Is that part of is there room for that too?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be. I think the hard part is the mass sort of shift in consumer adoption that would need to happen around the knowledge, actually, of how to make things like that delicious as the beef that they're going to give up. And I think the state that we have, in particular here in the US, is that nobody cooks. Nobody knows how to cook. Nobody knows how to make things delicious. And we've lost that as a skill.
That's an interesting point.
And so we'd have to combine the sort of move towards plant-based with actually culinary skills to get people back in the kitchen to be able to adopt those kind of new moves.
I think Lauren had something.
I just have a quick thing, and I've actually learned it from Miguel, my friend Miguel Villarreal, who's a vegan. Also, he was in charge of my own school lunch program, and the kids hadn't eaten meat in 10 years, hadn't eaten red meat in 10 years, and recently we got some red meat back on the menu. But
it's in tacos.
Yeah, right. But my point is that Miguel taught me this is maybe we should make our plates more plant forward and a small amount of meat instead of, like I grew up where a big ribeye was the center of the plate. And that's probably not good for us or the environment. But, plant forward with a small amount of meat is probably the way it's going to. You're not going to get people to quit eating meat. And I really do believe it's healthy, and depending on what you read, and who you're a disciple of, you can make your own decisions.
I know we're trying to wrap up, but Chris?
I was just going to say, I think the question is a good one. One is how now shall we eat, but also in the face of certain climate disaster if we don't act actively. I think one of the moments and takeaways I would love for this group to have is actually centered on Project Drawdown. Traditionally, the climate community has been focused on the energy sector for solutions. 8 of the top 20 drawdown solutions are actually food and agriculture. So I think that's a moment for us in the food industry to take that flag and lead with it. And I think it's an all hands type of approach that's needed over the next decade.
Wrap us up, Anthony.
Geez, well, how much time do you have? Just to answer the question really quick, I feel like we need to eat less beef the way it's currently produced, but we need to think about the land as a massive opportunity, and it would be way easier to change how that land is managed than to convince many, many people to stop eating beef. And in fact, changing it could kind of like solve the whole problem with feedlots that people have anyway, because as Lauren mentions, like the animals get fatter, they're more healthy, it's more nutritious. You may find some reality where the animals are super fat, they go into the feedlot for a week to get even fatter or something. There's a lot of research about average daily gain and how much more productive that is. But overall, I just want to go back to that concept of it's not what you eat, it's how it was produced.
All right, how it was produced. Thanks, everyone.